It was a bright June afternoon, and the sun hung gently in the sky. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass, and kids' laughter echoed from a nearby park. 8-year-old Emily Warren was wearing her favorite blue dress with tiny sunflowers on it. Her shoes were slightly scuffed, and her hair was pulled into a messy ponytail. She held a crumpled dollar bill in her hand, humming to herself as she opened the door to the corner store. Her dad, Carl Warren, stayed in the car, just a few steps away. He was scrolling through his phone, listening to a sports radio show. It was a small-town routine. Safe. Familiar. Nothing about it felt wrong. Emily had done this before. Just a quick run inside to grab her favorite strawberry swirl ice cream bar. She always came back with a sticky smile and pink lips. Inside the store, the bell above the door jingled as she walked in. The cashier, an older man with kind eyes, gave her a wave. She waved back and walked straight to the freezer section. The security camera above the soda machine caught everything. Emily stood in front of the freezer, opened the door, and picked out her ice cream. She smiled, held it close to her chest, and walked to the counter. "That's my favorite one, too," the cashier said with a grin as he rang her up. Emily gave him her dollar and waited for the change. She looked outside through the store's window. Her dad's truck was still there. She tucked the coins into her pocket, said thank you, and pushed open the door. That was the last time anyone saw her. Outside, the sun still shined. A light breeze danced through the parking lot. But something changed in those quiet moments. Emily never made it back to the car. Carl looked up from his phone after a few minutes and frowned. He stepped out of the truck, expecting to see her skipping back with her ice cream, maybe taking a bite and getting it on her nose like she always did. But she wasn't there. He walked toward the store, looked around. No sign of her. No laughter. No ice cream. He rushed inside and asked the cashier, who blinked in confusion. "She just left," the man said. 2, maybe 3 minutes ago." Carl ran out, calling her name. "Emily. Emily." He circled the lot, checked behind the building, asked strangers nearby. No one had seen anything. No scream. No noise. Just nothing. Within the hour, police were at the scene. Yellow tape, flashing lights, questions. The store's security footage was pulled and played over and over. Everyone saw the same thing. Emily entering the store, buying the ice cream, and walking out the door. But what came after was a mystery. The camera outside the store had a blurry view of the parking lot, and in the background, something caught an officer's attention. A vehicle. A truck, pulling out slowly and turning left down the road. It was hard to make out details, but it didn't belong to anyone known in town. No one saw where it went. No one could say if it had anything to do with Emily's disappearance. But for Carl, that moment marked the beginning of a nightmare. The kind that didn't fade with time. The days after Emily's disappearance were filled with confusion and disbelief. The quiet town of Maple Glen, known for its peaceful streets and small-town charm, felt suddenly cold and heavy. The missing poster, with Emily's bright smile and the words, "Have you seen me?" in bold letters, appeared on every telephone pole, in store windows, and in every corner of town. People who had once never locked their doors now kept them tightly shut. Carl Warren could hardly sleep. Every night, he stayed up, his eyes glued to the photos of his daughter pinned to the wall in his living room. He couldn't shake the image of her face, so full of innocence, as she walked out of that store. Each passing hour without her felt like a knife twisting in his heart. Police scoured the area for days, combing through nearby woods, checking local rivers, and asking everyone they could find if they had seen anything strange. Carl was there every step of the way, asking anyone who would listen. He talked to neighbors, friends, and even strangers. "Have you seen anything? Did anyone hear anything unusual?" He asked with a desperation that no one could ignore, but it felt like no one had any answers. In the first few days, A few people claimed to have seen someone matching the description of a man who was parked near the store around the time Emily disappeared. He was described as having a scruffy beard and a dark jacket, but no one could agree on whether he had been standing near the store or sitting in his car. The police followed the lead, but it turned out to be a dead end. There was no trace of the man, and no one could remember the license plate of his vehicle. As the days turned into weeks, the search efforts continued, but slowly the town's focus began to shift. Maple Glen had a habit of moving on, even when things seemed impossible. The media had stopped paying attention, and the missing person posters started to fade as the weather changed. Only Carl remained as determined as ever. He refused to let go. He couldn't believe that Emily was gone forever. As the months passed, the once busy coffee shop where Emily's mom used to work became quieter. Her friends stopped showing up, unsure of how to comfort her. Carl spent more time alone, retracing his steps from that day. He went back to the store every week, hoping that something, anything, would remind him of what had happened. The store manager had been kind, and they went over the footage again and again, but there was nothing new to find. The ice cream, the smile, the quiet walk out the door, none of it made sense. Even though the police were still technically investigating, they seemed to have run out of leads. They had asked Carl not to get his hopes up, but he couldn't stop. He refused to believe that Emily had simply vanished into thin air. Every part of him told him she was still out there. The thought kept him going, even when everything seemed hopeless. Meanwhile, the town tried to move on, but something was different. Families no longer went on evening walks. Children played inside instead of outside. The fear of the unknown hung over Maple Glen like a thick cloud. Everyone was looking over their shoulder, wondering if anyone could disappear the way Emily had. Carl knew that he couldn't stop searching. Not now. Not ever. As the years passed, life for Carl Warren became a routine of sadness and hope. It had been 6 long years since Emily vanished. The once peaceful home that Carl had shared with his wife, Sarah, now felt like a shell of what it used to be. The walls, once filled with laughter and love, were now silent. Every room, every corner reminded him of the little girl he couldn't bring home. Sarah had changed too. The pain of losing Emily was too much for their marriage to survive. The grief, the unanswered questions, it tore them apart. They tried to stay strong for each other at first, but the long nights and endless searching had worn them down. Eventually, Sarah couldn't take the constant reminders of their lost daughter. She moved out, seeking a fresh start somewhere far away from the memories. Carl was left alone in the house that once felt like a safe place. The quiet was deafening. He stopped going out with friends, stopped talking to anyone who didn't share his mission. He was determined to find Emily, and nothing else mattered. He didn't know what he was looking for anymore, but he couldn't give up. The pain of not knowing where she was, or if she was even alive, gnawed at him every day. Every year, on the anniversary of Emily's disappearance, Carl would visit the corner store. He would stand in front of the place where she had last been seen, remembering the smile on her face, the way she skipped inside with excitement. The store had changed over time. The manager was different, and the shelves were stocked with new items. But for Carl, it was still the same store, the place where everything had gone wrong. The town of Maple Glen had moved on, in its own way. People had stopped talking about Emily. There were new kids to focus on, new families to watch grow up. The posters that had once been everywhere had started to fade and fall off. Even the local news had stopped covering the case, but Carl never gave up. He continued to make phone calls, look up old leads, and search for any clue that might bring him closer to his daughter. He even visited therapists and support groups, hoping to find some comfort, but they never seemed to understand. They all told him the same thing. It's been too long, Carl. You need to move on. But how could he? How could he ever move on when there was still so much left unanswered? The thought of her being out there, somewhere, kept him going. Every night, he lay in bed and imagined what she might be doing. Was she in trouble? Was she safe? Or had she forgotten him completely? The physical toll was obvious. Carl had lost weight, and his hair had started to gray at the temples. The stress had begun to show in the deep lines of his face, lines that were once full of laughter. But inside, the spark of hope still burned. He couldn't explain it. He just knew that Emily was out there. He could feel it in his bones. She was waiting for him to find her, and he would never stop looking. His obsession with finding her took him to new places, new leads. He spent weekends traveling across the country, visiting towns he had never heard of. He followed every lead, no matter how small, no matter how distant. Carl had become a man on a mission. The world around him had changed, but his goal remained the same: find Emily, bring her home. It was just another long drive for Carl. He had been on the road for hours, heading through small towns in Texas, following a tip that had led him to a dead end. As always, he had no idea if it would lead to anything, but he refused to give up. With each passing mile, he thought of Emily and the smile she had when she was last with him. That memory kept him going, even when the road seemed endless. On this particular day, Carl was driving along a stretch of highway, trying to clear his head. The radio played softly in the background, but Carl wasn't really listening. He was used to the silence of long drives, his mind drifting from thought to thought. He had spent years chasing after small pieces of information, hoping that one lead would bring him closer to the truth. As he passed through a tiny town, he slowed down, just taking in the sights. It was a quiet place, nothing out of the ordinary. There was a diner on the left, a few old houses on the right, and a gas station up ahead. Nothing that screamed danger or suspicious. But something caught his eye, just for a split second. A truck. A dusty, faded blue pickup truck was parked near the gas station. It didn't look like anything special at first, but as Carl's eyes flicked over it, something clicked in his mind. He wasn't sure why, but the truck seemed familiar. Maybe it was the old dent on the side. Maybe it was the way it sat there, forgotten and weathered. He couldn't put his finger on it, but it felt important, like he had seen it before. His heart started to beat a little faster as he slowed the car and glanced back. The truck was still there, the engine idling, and the driver's side window cracked open just enough for a wisp of smoke to curl out. Carl didn't know why, but something told him to keep going. He told himself that it was probably nothing, just another truck in a small town. But as he drove past the gas station, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had to know more. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as he glanced at the rearview mirror. For a moment, he thought about just keeping on his way. But then the thought hit him. What if this was the lead he had been searching for all these years? What if this truck was somehow connected to Emily's disappearance? Carl couldn't stop himself. Without thinking, he made a quick decision. He turned the car around and headed back toward the gas station. He wasn't sure what he planned to do, but something deep inside told him to follow his instincts. The truck was still there, parked in the same spot, though the driver's side door was now closed. Carl parked his truck a few spaces away, his heart pounding in his chest. He grabbed his phone and snapped a picture of the truck, the dent now clearly visible in the photo. He wasn't sure what he was hoping for, maybe a license plate number, maybe a name, but for the first time in a long time, he felt something that he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Maybe this was a clue. Maybe this truck had something to do with Emily. He didn't know why, but he had to find out. He sat there for a moment, staring at the truck in the rearview mirror. The decision felt risky, but Carl knew he couldn't let it go. Not this time. Carl sat in his truck, staring at the faded blue pickup. His heart was racing, and his mind was running through 1,000 thoughts at once. He wasn't sure what he hoped to find, but he knew he couldn't just leave. For the first time in years, he felt a strange sense of urgency, like something important was about to happen. After a few moments, he took a deep breath and stepped out of his truck. His boots crunched on the gravel as he walked toward the gas station, his eyes still locked on the old truck. The closer he got, the more certain he became that this was no coincidence. The dent on the side of the truck, the way it sat there, it all felt like a piece of the puzzle he had been chasing for so long. The gas station was empty except for a few cars parked by the pumps. Carl looked around, but there was no one in sight. The shop was closed, and the parking lot was quiet. He glanced at the truck again, taking in every detail. It looked worn and tired, just like it had been through a lot. The kind of truck that someone would keep for years, even when it wasn't running perfectly. He walked closer, moving slowly, trying to stay calm. His mind kept asking the same questions. Who owned this truck? Why did it feel so familiar? And most importantly, did it have anything to do with Emily? He reached the truck and stopped for a moment, taking a deep breath. He could feel his heart thumping in his chest. There was no sign of the driver, no movement, just the quiet hum of the wind in the trees. Carl reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He quickly snapped another photo of the truck from a different angle, hoping it would help later. He turned to head back to his own truck, but before he could take more than a few steps, a voice startled him. "Can I help you?" It was a man's voice, rough and low. Carl spun around, his heart skipping a beat. The man was standing by the truck, looking at him with a curious but cautious expression. He was older, with a scruffy beard and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. His clothes were worn, as if he had been working outside for a long time. Carl hesitated, not sure what to say. He hadn't expected anyone to show up. The man was looking at him closely, as if sizing him up. Carl cleared his throat and forced himself to speak. Yeah. I was just admiring your truck. I've seen one like it before." His voice sounded more uncertain than he had intended. The last thing he wanted was to come off as suspicious. The man raised an eyebrow, but didn't move. "Really?" he asked, his tone skeptical. "I've had this old thing for years. It's nothing special." Carl nodded, his mind racing. "Yeah, I guess I just recognized the dent on the side," he said casually, hoping the man wouldn't catch on. "Looks like it's been through a lot." The man's expression changed slightly, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Yeah, well, it's been around a long time. Just like me." He paused, glancing around the lot. "You live around here?" "No, just passing through," Carl replied quickly, trying to keep the conversation casual. He didn't want to give away too much. The last thing he wanted was for the man to get suspicious of him. The stranger didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked at Carl for a long moment, as if weighing something in his mind. Then, without saying another word, he turned and walked back to the truck, opening the door and climbing inside. Carl stood there, frozen for a moment. His stomach churned with a strange mix of excitement and dread. Had he just been talking to someone who knew something about Emily, or was it all just a coincidence? Before he could think too much more, the truck's engine roared to life, and the man drove away without another word, disappearing down the road. Carl stood in the empty lot, staring after the truck, his mind racing. He didn't know if this was a breakthrough or another dead end. But one thing was clear. He couldn't stop now. He had to find out more. Carl stood still, watching the blue truck disappear down the quiet road. The dust from its tires swirled in the air. And for a moment, everything felt like it was frozen in time. He felt a surge of frustration mixed with hope. Had that man known something? Had he just been a stranger with a truck? Or was there a deeper connection to Emily's disappearance? For a long time, Carl didn't move. He just stared at the empty road. The day was slipping into evening, and the quiet of the small town seemed to press down on him. He had always believed that one day he would find the answers, but the longer he searched, the more elusive they seemed. His heart told him to keep chasing, but his head was filled with doubts. He got into his truck and started the engine, the low hum of the motor the only sound in the stillness. He didn't know what he was going to do next. Should he follow the man, try to track him down, or should he let it go, accept that he had just found another dead end? His fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly. He couldn't let it go. Not now. He had come too far to stop. The man in the blue truck had seen something. He had reacted in a way that made Carl suspicious. Maybe it was just the way he looked at him, or maybe it was the way he didn't seem surprised by the mention of the dent on his truck. Either way, Carl couldn't ignore it. He turned the truck around and drove down the road, following the path the man had taken. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the fields and empty streets. Carl's mind was racing as he tried to think of his next move. If he followed the truck, what would he do when he found the man? Confront him, ask questions, or just let it go and accept that some mysteries would never be solved. The road stretched ahead, empty and quiet, but Carl kept his eyes on the distance. He wasn't sure what he was hoping for, but something inside him told him to keep going. After a few miles, he saw the truck ahead, parked outside a small rundown house. It was nothing special, just an old farmhouse on the edge of town, with overgrown weeds and a porch that looked like it hadn't been painted in years. The truck was parked in the driveway, its engine now silent. The man was nowhere to be seen. Carl parked his truck a little farther down the road, making sure he wasn't too close. He wasn't sure what he was doing. He wasn't a detective, just a father looking for answers. But something inside told him that he needed to find out more. The man was hiding something. Maybe it wasn't about Emily directly, but it had to be connected to the events that had happened that day. Too many things didn't add up. He sat in his truck for a long time, watching the house. It was dark now, the only light coming from the faint glow of the porch light. There were no signs of life, no movement, no sounds, just silence. Carl felt a pang of doubt. Maybe this was all just a waste of time. The man could be a stranger with no connection to Emily at all. He could be nothing more than a man with a truck, just trying to live his life. But then again, what if he wasn't? After what felt like hours, Carl finally made a decision. He couldn't just sit there forever. He wasn't going to find any answers by waiting. Slowly, he pulled his truck away from the house, his mind still swirling with uncertainty. As he drove back down the road, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. But for now, all he could do was keep searching. And he would. He had to. The days after Carl's visit to the rundown house felt like a blur. He couldn't stop thinking about the blue truck and the man who had been driving it. Something about him didn't sit right with Carl. But there was still no solid proof that this man had anything to do with Emily's disappearance. The feeling of uncertainty was eating away at him, but he knew that if he gave up now, he might never find out the truth. So, Carl did what he always did when he hit a wall. He kept moving forward. He called the local police again, this time asking if there had been any reports of a truck like the one he had seen. The officer on the other end was patient, but their conversation didn't lead to much. "Sorry, sir, but we don't have any leads on a blue truck matching that description. You should probably let it go. It's been years." Those words hit Carl like a punch in the stomach, but he didn't give up. He wasn't ready to let go of his daughter's memory. Later that day, he drove back to the small town where he had seen the truck. He parked in the same spot where he had been the other night and walked around the gas station, trying to clear his mind. As he walked, his eyes fell on a small store just across the street. It wasn't much, just a corner shop with faded signs, but something about it caught his attention. He walked over and noticed that the door was slightly open, as if someone had just been there but forgotten to lock it. He hesitated for a moment. It wasn't like him to wander into random places, especially at night, but this time he felt drawn to it. Maybe there was something here that he had missed before. Inside, the store was quiet and dark, the only light coming from a small lamp by the counter. The shelves were filled with dusty cans and old snacks. Carl walked slowly down the aisles, hoping to find something, anything, that might give him a clue. As he reached the back of the store, he noticed an old photograph taped to the wall. It was a black and white picture, faded with age, but the faces were still clear. Curious, Carl stepped closer to the photo. His heart skipped a beat when he recognized a face in the picture. It was the man with the blue truck. He was younger, but it was definitely him. Standing next to him was a woman, and beside her, a little girl. Carl's breath caught in his throat. The girl in the photo looked so much like Emily. Her smile, the same blonde hair, the same eyes. The image was blurry, but the more Carl stared at it, the more certain he became. The man with the blue truck had a connection to Emily. It was undeniable now. He turned and looked around the store. The silence in the air felt heavier now, as if the building itself was holding its breath. He needed answers. But just as he was about to call out for anyone who might be there, the door to the back room creaked open. A voice called from the shadows, "Can I help you?" Carl's heart raced. He turned slowly, his eyes landing on the woman who had stepped into view. She was older now, but her eyes were the same, and her face, even more weathered by time, still held a familiar warmth. It was the woman in the photograph. "Do you know who I am?" Carl asked, his voice barely a whisper. The woman studied him for a long moment before she nodded. "I know exactly who you are," she said softly. "You're Emily's father, aren't you?" Carl's breath caught in his throat. Everything had changed in an instant. The answers he had been searching for, the mystery he had been chasing for years, were finally within reach. Carl stood frozen, his mind racing. Hearing the woman speak those words was like a punch to the gut. His legs felt weak, and for a moment, he wasn't sure if he was even hearing correctly. Emily's father. How did she know that? His heart pounded in his chest as he tried to stay calm, to make sense of everything happening all at once. The woman stepped forward, her face serious but gentle. "You don't remember me, do you?" she asked softly. Carl shook his head, still trying to process everything. "No, I don't. How do you know who I am? And how do you know about Emily?" The woman looked down, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the counter. "My name is Clara. I used to be a close friend of your wife, Sarah. We used to talk about Emily all the time." Clara's words hit Carl like a wave. Sarah. He remembered the name, of course. Sarah had been his wife, but they had drifted apart after Emily disappeared. He couldn't understand what Clara had to do with any of it. He felt a growing sense of confusion. "Sarah and I had our own lives," Clara continued, her voice low and steady. "But I knew a lot about Emily. She was a bright, sweet girl. I know this is hard to hear, but the day she went missing, it wasn't a random thing. It wasn't just some kidnapping. There was someone involved. Someone we knew." Carl's stomach twisted. His mind was racing as he tried to make sense of Clara's words. "Who took my daughter?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Clara's eyes darkened. "It was my husband, Eddie. He was the one driving the truck you saw." She paused, letting her words sink in. "He's been hiding it for all these years. We both have." The weight of Clara's confession crashed down on Carl. His mind swirled with questions. He had seen the truck. He had felt something was wrong, but hearing it all laid out like this was too much to process. Eddie, the man he had seen, the man who had looked so familiar, was involved in his daughter's disappearance. Clara wiped away a tear, her voice breaking as she continued. "I never wanted to be a part of this. Eddie was a different man back then. I don't know what happened to him, but I found out what he did. And when I did, I tried to stop him. But it was too late. I couldn't change what had already happened." Carl's heart clenched in his chest. The anger, the hurt, and the disbelief were overwhelming. "So you knew. All this time, you knew where she was. Why didn't you come forward?" he asked, the frustration clear in his voice. Clara shook her head. "I was scared. Eddie threatened me. He said that if I told anyone, he would hurt me too. I couldn't risk it. But I couldn't live with the guilt any longer. I had to tell you the truth. You deserve to know what happened." Carl's eyes filled with tears. He had spent so many years searching, thinking that he might never get answers. Now, the truth was in front of him, but it felt like it wasn't enough. He didn't know what to feel: anger at Clara for not speaking sooner, or relief that he finally had some answers. "Where is she?" Carl asked, his voice trembling. Clara looked down at the floor, her hands wringing together. "She's alive," she whispered. "But Eddie, he kept her hidden all this time. He never let her go. He thought she was his secret. I don't know where she is now, but I can help you find her." For the first time in years, Carl felt a spark of hope. The truth was finally out, and it was the beginning of a new chapter. It wasn't over yet, but he was closer than ever to finding his daughter.